Coming up on the Branding Deep Dive podcast.
And it's such a saturated market, it's very hard to get it out. And the only way I see it, like you can put money towards advertisements and stuff, but at the end of the day, I think what really will make it work is word of mouth. That's what made Catan work, Ticket to Ride, Pandemic. That's what even like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. It's when you play with your friends and then you share with other people and you build those communities. I saw at the library the other day they had a Catan tournament.
Oh, really?
Catan Public Library. And the day before that, they had a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. I didn't even know people are still that invested in this stuff.
This is Ahmed Shima, and welcome to the Branding Deep Dive podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we have in-depth discussions about what brands are doing well to drive customer loyalty and how you can take those principles and apply them in your own brand. Today, we're talking to Mahir Huq. For those of you that don't know Mahir, he is the man behind the rise of Catan in the Detroit metro area. If your friends recently started playing Catan or other board games nonstop, chances are Mahir had something to do with it. Mahir recently got his hands on a new board game called Machinate, and in this episode, we get into how this new board game is looking to shake things up in a market dominated by conglomerates. We go deep into the resurgence of board games, building a community, the structure of the board game industry in general, trading cards, NFTs, and much, much more. This episode is a must listen for anyone looking to generate word of mouth for their brand. Now, here's Mahir Huq. Can you kind of just give the audience a little bit of a background to who you are, what you do, and how you got into board games?
Well, that's pretty simple how I got into it, COVID. I got bored and, board games. But no, my boring side of me, I'm an actuary, econ, math, all that. But I like anything that involves strategy. When COVID started, it was everyone like, what are we going to do? It's work from home. So everyone started watching movies, playing Warzone. But I got bored of that. Everyone did, to be frank. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to do something different. Step away from TV. And like 2 months in, I think May of last year during COVID, when people were like, okay, maybe if we see each other in masks, 6 feet, remember that period?
Yeah.
We'll be fine. So finally, when we first got interaction, I was like, we got to do something. There's something that we've got to be able to do, because we just missed everyone. And for us, we're millennials, zillennials, whatever you call it, brought up in the 90s, and it's that nostalgia factor. I know you guys have discussed that before when it comes to branding, but that nostalgia factor, for games like Monopoly, and we branched out, we got tired of Monopoly. I was playing chess with Yusuf for a little bit, involved strategy. He taught me some cool tricks and stuff. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me see what games are popular. Talk to some of my friends, what they played in college. We revived Yu-Gi-Oh! We got into that. I know Shahir's got a deck, Yusuf's got a deck, everyone's got a deck, And we played that for a bit, but I think what really stuck to us was Catan. That game was interesting because that one was, in an aspect, everything that we wanted from Monopoly and more. That one was, everyone understood it. It's very simple. I think that's what kind of clicked for everyone. And in Warzone, what would happen, I'm going back a little bit, in Warzone what would happen is everyone would count their dubs, their wins. Right? Mm-hmm. We did the same thing with Catan. We kept track of that. We had we really got in that competitive spirit, and that's what kept us coming back. Mm-hmm. Who's got the most wins? Who's got the best strategies? All that.
For the audience, can you explain real quick what Catan is, just high level? I mean,
oh man, Catan is. So yeah, I got the board game right here. You go into Target, you go in anywhere, you see this 80s style board game. A lot of my friends in college, they all played this. I don't know why, but I've never played it. But you talk to some of the people, from the 80s, 70s, they remember this game. They've played this game probably. Essentially, the game, what it's about is, it's kind of like Monopoly in a way, but it's more strategic. You allocate resources to build settlements, and your whole goal is to get 10 points. That's long story short. There's trading involved, there's probability involved, and all that. But that's the long story short. Get 10 points, you get the win. And it's a great feeling when you get a win because it gets intense sometimes. It gets heated. But I'll get a little bit more into the brand itself of Catan, because Catan and all these games, and the game that I wanted to introduce, Machinate, it's always someone who's, in the garage or in their room just thinking like, I want to come up with something, and their creative minds come up with these board games. And I will tell you that it's not easy at all to get your game out there in the market. A lot of people have struggled, have failed, and some games are just, they've been in the market, but they're never really break through, right? Mm-hmm. Catan, any store you go to, you'll see it there on the shelves. And they sold millions and millions of copies, but you don't really hear of the name till literally COVID. Everyone I've played with, they've bought a board game. And then I got married last year. I introduced it to all her family members, cousins. They all got it. All my friends that are married, they all got it. They spread it to their families. It spread like crazy. And I'm not saying I started it. I'm sure there were other people during the same time during COVID. I know I was reading an article where during lockdown, there was this huge jump where the game and puzzle market exceeded like $11 billion. Wow. 11 to 12 billion. That's insane for something that was so small. You wouldn't see people playing board games like that, but 11 to 12 billions since COVID. And yeah, so these games just started taking off. There's Pandemic, which is more of a game that's like based off of the players versus the game. It's a really cool idea. It's you playing against probability, and you working as a team to beat the game itself. And obviously you've heard of games like Jumanji and whatnot. Ticket to Ride is under the same umbrella as Catan. And essentially, you can't keep a game the same either forever, right? Because people will get bored, they'll look for other things. So what these games do is, I don't know if you play video games, but downloadable content, essentially the same thing. They create expansion packs or different versions you can add on to this board game. So that's how they really get a cult going. But yeah, these games, I mean, it's all about how do you create this cult? How do you create this fan base, And then the other thing I wanted to get into is hype. There's always hype behind this, and nostalgia. Remember how we were just talking about nostalgia, and how I kind of got back into it, Yu-Gi-Oh! People want these collectibles too. Monopoly has thousands of different versions of itself. And a lot of them are collector's editions for like Star Wars or Marvel or Dragon Ball Z. I saw a Dragon Ball Z one today. And it's that nostalgic factor that has people, I want this as a collector, I'll play it, or, I'll hang it up on a shelf. That's kind of what they're going for. It's hype. It's all hype up. The TCG industry, for example, since COVID, you go into any Meijer, Walmart, Target, any of those retail stores, you will not find Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, baseball, basketball cards. You'll find Magic. That's a different story. I mean, Magic was... I don't know much about Magic. I went to a card shop once, and I was like, what the hell is Magic? And he's like, it's only the most played TCG in the world. And I was like, oh, my bad. But Magic was apparently the one that started it all. But Magic was its own thing. So when Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and even Dragon Ball Z, Digimon apparently, they all have their own card-based games. And when the fans of those get into those, they like collectibles. They like holding on to those things. So we grew up with that in the 90s. And now that is, our age people are turning like 20, 30, 35, 40, whatever it is. They want to introduce their kids into it. They want to get their kids into it. And that's where this hype came back. There was, for Pokemon, there was something where they re-released something. It's not the original one, but it's the same artwork from the original. That's what clicked. People wanted the Charizards. The prices went insane. There's celebrities like Logic the rapper, There's this YouTuber, I forget his name, Logan Paul or something. Steve Aoki as well. They started doing rips on Twitch. Twitch is, for those who don't know, it's the Amazon company. It's what gives access to communities to find streamers or content producers, to find their own, how do I put it? Their own
Community.
cult or community. Sorry. So each streamer, like I have a friend, he's really into Pokemon. I mean, he still works his job, but on the side, he's only been doing Pokemon since COVID, and he's already verified by Twitch or whatever. He's got the check mark. He's got a huge fan base. He's going viral on TikTok, all that stuff. He's created this community of Pokemon fans, where he really allows people to, join in to what he's doing. All he does is play video games. He'll open packs, whatever. They subscribe. They help build his, his hobby, so he can provide more. Those packs aren't cheap either. But it's the collectible. What he does with the cards is what gets his fan base to go collect cards, and then you go on the Discord. It's like, oh, I pulled this. I pulled this. That's the same thing with these games. When you have this game and you play it, and you play with your group of friends, and they spread it out, you're starting to build this community. Everyone wants it. Everyone wants it. They want to have it in their house, even if they don't play it for 5 years. It's there on a shelf, so you invite guests over, they'll see that, oh, you got Catan here, Some people, I know I have a friend, he hung up all 151 original Pokemon cards in a frame as a flex, essentially, It's that hype. It's that hype.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's, I have some of these Pokemon cards, like the original 151. If I were to get those graded and sell it, I mean, it's not the perfect condition, but it's all around 10 grand. It's just, I'm kind of attached to it, so I'm not going to do it. But if you were to buy a box of the 90s version, right? It's 50 grand for a box, about around that price. You break it, you pull a Charizard, that's 100K. You see where this hype is coming for? So during COVID, everyone's sitting at home, they want to make money too. You got scalpers. So now, back to what I was saying, Walmart, Meijer, and all this stuff, you go into those stores, you'll only see Magic, because the hype's not really there. But for Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and even back to what I was saying, sports collectible cards. I have my Pistons, because I'm a Pistons fan. But all these sports collectible cards, like baseball, hockey, football, basketball, these people line up like crazy. Like, I know for a fact that Myers, they have a 3 p.m. drop. Like Supreme, how they do drops every Thursday. Meyer has a drop at 3 p.m. for these Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, sports trading cards. It's insane, and they sell out. And obviously, it depends on the sets. Everyone was going for the Charizards or Pikachu. The newer ones, they don't really have that much nostalgia just yet. But that's why everyone looks into it as an investment. You hold it in 20 years, maybe the same thing will happen with this generation. The young generation will want it back and pay extra for it in the future. So going back to board games, for example, with Monopoly makes, if it's a Star Wars edition, they're going to make those little figurines Star Wars based. And that itself becomes a collector's edition. And that's how they reach out to different fan bases. They'll create one for, I don't know, what's a popular show? Game of Thrones. I'm sure there's a Game of Thrones edition out there. And the fans, diehard fans, will want that, right? So, essentially, that's how they really get their brand out. You can't just have that same Monopoly board that we've all seen and expect it to last. They last because they expand out to different groups as well, right?
Man, Mahir, you just dropped so much all at the
same
time.
I feel like I didn't really have an organized train of thought. I just went on rambling on.
It was really good. There's just so much that there's just so much to dive into. First thing I wanted to quickly just recap and make sure I'm getting this right is, I'll start with this one. So you're saying that these board games, one of the ways that they're able to expand and reach out to new crowds is to create these expansion packs that are targeted to a certain demographic, whether that is, a certain show.
Let me reword that. Actually, it's either expansion pass or like exclusive edition. I should have mentioned exclusive edition, like Monopoly does essentially.
Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the ways they're able to find. Even if you have a Monopoly pack, you'll pay extra to get another one of these because you like Game of Thrones or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen it. I go to some of my friends' houses, and I mean, I'm a nerd, so whenever when I move out of the state and I have my own place, I want to kind of do that stuff too. I want to flex some of the collective stuff I have too. So yeah, it's a flex. People like having these things. It gives them that nostalgic, feel of them having it. So
one thing you just brought up, that it's a flex. I think a lot of the decisions we make, we'd like to think we're rational, but we really aren't. Like, we're willing to spend all this money just so that someone, when they come to our house, they see that we're into Pokemon, or they see that we're into this.
You want to flex your interests. You want
exactly,
but you want to make it subtle.
Exactly.
You want to, exactly.
That's the same. I mean, like, if you really break it down, that's what a lot of branding is, right? Like, understanding how can I make myself look like I'm a part of this tribe, right? So Apple does a great job. What are the first things you think of when you think of Apple?
Bro, if you own an iPhone, you gotta have the Mac, you gotta have the AirPod. It's that white, it's a simplistic,
Yeah.
That's what they want.
It's that luxury feel, and you feel like you're sophisticated, right? Like,
you feel like you're part of the world. Exactly. I used to have an Android, and I just felt always so detached from my friend groups because it's the iMessage group chats,
That's hilarious. You feel like you're part of the world. So one thing I wanted to talk about in particular here is that historically we have seen, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, and I want to just dive into it. So board games historically have, if we break down branding into 3 different touch points, right? Pre-purchase, purchase, and then post-purchase. Board games have focused on the post-purchase aspect, right? Which is you're not necessarily going to see a lot of people buy Monopoly or any of these board games after seeing an ad. While they may be spending some money on advertisements, that awareness doesn't always translate to people buying the product, right? What really helps in this process is kind of what Mahir described, is that he bought a game and then he invited his friends over, and then
word of
mouth, and then the experiences that they're able to have with this board game, right? So not only are you having, like, you're playing a game, but now you're able to create a whole tournament style setup, league. You can really take it as far as you want to take it.
I never knew this, but apparently there's worldwide championships of this game. My wife's cousin, we went to their house, and I guess one of the brothers, they're like, they play like dungeon, like they're extreme, like they play Dungeons and Dragons. I wish I knew more about that stuff, but I just don't have the time to invest in like Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons. But he played at some Oxford like worldwide championship. No, and dude, that guy was the smartest guy I've ever played with. He didn't say a word. He didn't trade with anyone. And he just, smooth, and he just destroyed us all.
That's crazy.
But, it does have a competitive environment as well. There's actual competitions that happen.
One of the things that's interesting about bigger brands nowadays is that you see the focus shifting from pre-purchase to post-purchase and purchase as well. So one of the examples of this is Apple. Although they have some of the greatest ads ever, when they made the decision to shift and create physical stores, that was seen as like a crazy move. But they invested in that purchase experience so that they can create an experience for their users there, right? And so one of the things we see here is actually, in a lot of these big brands, they're shifting this way, where they're going more towards purchase and post-purchases. But with these board games, and you kind of touched on this with the Twitch and all that stuff, is that we are seeing a little bit of a shift here, where it's going from post-purchase to also back to pre-purchase, which is, these Twitch streams you're talking about, creating these communities and just raising awareness through various means. And it's not ads, but you do see this stuff on social media, right? And so if you could touch a little bit on how board games are growing. I know you mentioned like last time we talked that T-Pain is on Twitch too. One of the crazy
Yeah,
discoveries.
T-Pain's on Twitch. I mean, all these celebrities are on Twitch. Twitch isn't just for video games. I know, like Amazon will stream Thursday Night Football on it sometimes, or
Mm.
I saw Bob Ross. I know uh, he's long gone, but he was they air his videos of him just painting. It's just hilarious.
Oh, really?
There's everything on Twitch. Yeah, it's becoming its own YouTube, I guess. But I mean, I know the trading card is pretty big on. It's primarily, I do have to say, it is video games, but there are podcasts on there. There are people just chatting. There's a stock guy. There's a guy who talks about soccer transfers. He's a very famous dude on Twitter. Anytime there's a trade or something. But aside from that, people create these communities on Twitch. But as far as board games, you don't see it as big on Twitch. It's there. Don't get me wrong. It's there. The trading card game is a little bit bigger on Twitch than just like regular board game, but it's there. I think what happens is essentially it's more word of mouth.
Mhm.
You go, like, you see someone on Twitch like flex, like, hey, I got this, like, I have this right here. This is a first edition box of Pandemic, first edition. So Pandemic right now, uh, it's actually owned by Asmodee. You won't see that here. It's actually says a game by Matt Leacock. That's his name, and it says Z-Man Games. That's not who actually owns the game anymore. The rights are actually Asmodee. Just like a 5 second on who Asmodee is. They're the next big conglomerate behind Hasbro. Hasbro,
Mm.
obviously, Monopoly and all those games. Asmodee is a French-based company. They picked up Pandemic, Ticket to Ride's another one, Catan's another one. They're the up and coming, and literally, I think COVID's the one that really made them the second biggest conglomerate in that board game industry. But back to this, it's that flex. So when Steve Aoki is flexing like, oh, I got this, collector's edition, blah blah blah. It's that flex, and then that's what really gets people curious. I mean, it got me curious, at least me, like for me to go out like, oh, let me do a little bit more research. What is this? Oh, let me actually try playing this. Um, let me see like if I can get some friends to play, and that's essentially what it does. You don't hear about Catan from. I've never seen a TV advertisement of Catan. I've never seen them even try to attempt advertisement on their board games. How often do you see board game advertisements? You don't. And why is that? It's because they have their own way of advertising. It's word of mouth.
Mhm.
That's what it is. It's their whole goal is to create those communities. You know. Now, one thing I will say is, like, I'm gonna touch base on hype beast like clothing. Supreme, for example, there was so much hype between 2016 to 2019. I mean, it's still a hype beast. People still want it, and there's limited version. But as soon as I forget the name, there was an investment company. I saw this on Hassan Minaj. There's an investment company that invested in this, bought out Supreme, and they flooded the market with Supreme. Less people want it. Okay, so same thing in TCG. Pokemon, the Pokemon company, multi-billion-dollar company. They see like, oh man, we're selling out so fast, blah blah blah. They started flooding the markets, and recently, like very recently, you walk into Target, you might find a box or two. Over the summer and since last year, you wouldn't find it. It's that scarce. But nowadays, you might find a box or two because they're um, overflowing the market essentially. So with these board games, these collector's editions, has Monopoly, Asmodee, what they did when they bought these, they printed out multiple versions of them. Okay, so what I do see in the future essentially is it may die down a little bit, but I think in the future people are still gonna remember the good times of it, right? And they'll still expand onto other board games.
Mm. Oh, hold on. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. You're saying that essentially, so you give the example of Supreme, right? Constricting supply so they can increase their demand, increase the price, and all that stuff. Same thing that we're seeing nowadays with these cards, right? Pokemon,
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever it may be, right? Like there's a limited supply so that the demand goes up and the prices go up So you're saying that this Hasmodi company overflooded the market, or is overflooding the market?
They are currently. So before, you would see maybe a box of Catan at Target and it'd be dusty because no one grabbed it. You'd see maybe a box of Ticket to Ride, it'd be dusty. Ticket to Ride has its own flex. If you look at their board games now, they say something like over 8 million sold, kind of like McDonald's, over 1 billion sold. But it's essentially like these games. When you go into like a Target, Meijer, wherever, you see more of them there. And people will buy it. Almost every household I've been to, that I've played with, they have a Catan board now. But essentially, you're gonna see like, it's gonna be something that's sitting on a shelf, and essentially, how I said, it's a flex. Oh yeah, you have it, but you're not gonna see. It's gonna die down. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to get to. So, and that's why I bring it back to how Monopoly's been keeping it alive with their exclusive editions. Catan, what they've done, they have different versions that you can essentially attach onto the board. It's the same board, but you pay $60 for expansion, like more cities or like a space version or pirates version, and you attach it to the board and expand it. Or in this game, how much are they? So the expansions, there's two types of expansion. There's expansion, say, expansion to like kind of change or add to the game. Those are $60. But this game itself, like this regular board, is 2 to 4 players. Now they created a small box edition that adds on to this. It's like $25. This game itself is, I think, $50 or $60. But they add on, it's like a $25 expansion with more pieces, essentially, for the same thing. So you can play with 2 more people, 6 players.
Hold on. So you're saying $60 for an expansion pack, and in the expansion pack is literally just these cardboard tiles that are different colors and stuff?
I'll open up and give you a good idea. So yeah, I even got this thing. I'm that much dedicated to this. Yeah, I have like my name engraved. But these things, right? There's only enough for like the regular board. This is hay. There's rock. There's wood, brick.
So for the audience that's not able to see, Mahir is just showing that
it's tiles essentially. Yeah, it's tiles for the board. And I'll get into Catan in a bit and explain it a little bit more. But essentially, that's enough for 2 to 4 players to play efficiently, right? There's only 4 colors you can use. Now, if you buy the expansion, it comes with 2 more. We call it development cards. If I explain that to people who haven't played to Catan, development cards are like chance cards from Monopoly. So you get more of those. You get more pieces to expand the board, essentially, allow more people to play. And this game alone takes, they say 60 minutes. If it's a new person playing, it'll take 1.5 hours, 2 hours easily with all the arguing. But this game itself, 60 minutes, it's pretty long. And I think the expansion, they added on a rule like every turn you can build to get the game going faster. Because let's be honest, we all know Risk. I haven't personally played Risk, but a lot of people have played Risk. But that's one thing. It's like it's kind of like what do you call it? Like a notorious, and I just can't think today. It's like a negative connotation with board games. I assume like they take forever, they become stagnant, blah blah blah. So that's a way you see with the expansion pass, when you get more players, instead of it taking forever, they found a way to change the rules a little bit and still get people to enjoy the game. It's essentially, the way I explain it to new people is it's a faster Monopoly. That's how I explain it. Yeah.
So one thing I want to touch on, and then let's get into Machinate, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, but one thing I want to just, for the audience that's listening, really just highlight this point here that Mahir is touching on, is that like the supply and demand is a very basic concept that I think most people understand. And it's really important in creating perceived value as well, right? Like Ferrari limits their supply every year. There's a wait list because they're creating perceived value. And if you're wondering what perceived value can do for your brand, I think what Mahir just mentioned in the expansion packs is a great example. Like the cost to produce those tiles is probably like $1,
Absolute minimal, yeah.
right?
Absolute
And they're able
minimal.
to charge $60 for it because there is a perceived value there, right? Like you can't charge that without people believing that this product is worth this much. And why do people believe it's worth this much? Is because of the brand they've built, right? And how have they done that? All these things that Mahir already mentioned. I'm
Building,
not going to get into all that again, but
yeah.
let's transition into Machinate. Can you talk a little bit about Machinate, how you got it, and the story behind that?
Yeah, so let me so the reason I also brought up the conglomerates as well is because these conglomerates really make it hard for people, these creative minds, to come up with games and bring it out to the market. Um, it's a very congested market. You go on YouTube and you'll see a lot of videos saying, "Oh, why you shouldn't get into this market, why you shouldn't create your own board games," all these negative things. And my friend, he loves games and stuff, and him and I think one or two of his buddies, they came up with a game, and it's you go on their website, it's not official yet. You won't see it on the market yet. They wanna. What I think they're doing is smart. They're testing the waters. They're trying to get word of mouth. So they'll send out these. I told them about our. Uh, I have a WhatsApp chat called the Gaming Table. That's what we started in COVID. And that's when we started playing chess, Yu-Gi-Oh, Risk, Pandemic, Catan, mostly. And I told them about that. And essentially, what they're trying to do, instead of flooding, putting so much investment, time, money into this game and, try to go straight into the market, they're trying to do the word of mouth, that route. Um, so they're trying to build that community, build that fan base. Um, so you won't see it on the market. They have an Instagram for it. They do have a website and explains the rules and everything. You can sign up for it, and they might send it out. Luckily, I know Mahran, my friend, and he texted his friend. He's like, "Yo, send Mahir a copy." Um, and I didn't get to play it right away because I went on my honeymoon right away. So it was like a month till I got to even open up the box. But and I'm gonna be honest, like we still play Catan like almost every week. So I only played this twice, but it wasn't a game that where I got deterred from it from the first time. And here's the biggest thing: it's a very shorter game.
Mhm.
It's about like 30 to it's under 60 minutes for sure. And that's I think why me and some of my friends enjoyed it. Because it's quick, you can play multiple games of it, and I think that's pretty cool from them to come up with a game that you still have the arguments, like you can still barter, you can still buy stuff. The game itself, the whole point is to build a complete robot. You want the best robot. You have income, and then there's a purchase phase where you can buy parts. You can also trade with people, and then there's an activate phase where you can like play one utility card, um, and there's also an auction, like where you can auction with other people. But yeah, I'm doing a terrible job at explaining it. But my whole point is they're trying to create that fan base, that cult.
Mhm.
Like I keep saying, get it from word of mouth. I know there's other people that they've sent this box out to, and it's a pretty cool box. They designed it really well. They got, I think on the back, his name is Joshua Menas. He's in charge of the illustrations, and they made it look cool. Like honestly, like if this ever becomes a thing, this box would be a flex. This is a first edition prototype.
Mhm.
Um, they have all their stuff on the back. It says created by Zach Johnson and Mahran Kadir. They have their website based in Seattle, Washington. So it looks cool. It looks, you know, like I want to show my friends this. I want to show them like, yo, this game is pretty dope. It's attractive, and that matters too to people. Like I'll be honest, when this game came out, it, it I don't know the exact year, but when it came out, it wasn't popular at all. What got it popular was actually when a company bought the rights to the game from this guy Matt Leacock. If you buy the game, I don't even think you'll see his name there anymore.
Mhm.
Like this game, how this shows Mahran and his friend Zach Johnson's name. Yeah, Zach Johnson. It shows their name on it, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Your name's on a board game. Same with this guy. This guy came up with one of the best board games ever. But that's the thing. These conglomerates, like they take possession of it, they take ownership of it and they expand it. But at the end of the day, sadly, I feel like that's the direction these people want to kind of go in. Like, you want to get it out eventually, right? And it's such a saturated market, it's very hard to get it out. And the only way I see it, like, you can put money towards advertisements and stuff, but at the end of the day, I think what really will make it work is word of mouth. That's what made Catan work, Ticket to Ride, Pandemic. That's what even like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. It's when you play with your friends and then you share with other people and you build those communities. I saw at the library the other day they had a Catan
Oh,
tournament,
really?
Catan Public Library, and the day before that they had a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. I didn't even know people are still that invested in this stuff, but it is growing that community. Is at the end of the day, each you go on every Twitch streamer, they have their own Discord, and that's how they really build their community. So even after their streams, people are able to express their thoughts, feelings, share even daily activities. And I've heard about another game. It's a card game, Phase 10, through a Discord. It was like a NBA Discord, and someone's like, "Yo, I'm playing Phase 10 during this game. I can't even focus on this." And then some people got into it like that, and it's like, "Oh, I just bought Phase 10," and then I found out my in-laws love Phase 10. They've already known about it. So I've been playing Phase 10. Phase 10, for those who don't know, it looks like Uno almost, but they've got their own rules. It's kind of like Rummy. I don't know if anyone's played Rummy either, but it's its own Uno type of game.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, it's word of mouth. That's what they're doing. They're not going straight into the market, putting all their money and time into it. They're really just trying to build that community.
Yeah.
They're not really advertising it hard. They have the website there. They have all this stuff there. But I feel like what they're doing, instead of going to the stores right away and stuff, they're really trying to build that community, you know? And it's essentially the community does the advertising for
Yep.
you.
One thing I wanted to quickly touch on is anyone that is in the business of providing some sort of experience, I think can take a lot of lessons from the way that they're going about marketing this product. Before we actually get into that, one thing I did want to say for the people that are interested in Machinate. So it sounds like, Mahir, please correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're building a robot and then you have to battle that robot with the other people on the board.
Yeah, yeah. It's essentially whoever builds the most complete best robot wins at that.
Okay. So you have to be the
It's
first
and
one to do it.
Yeah, first one
Got
to
it.
build like a complete one, and you want like in my opinion, the head is the best piece. So that's like the
So that's a
biggest
pro
deal when
tip.
you
If
have
you're playing Machinate, the head is the best.
yeah. I'm still new at it, and I'm learning every time. Like I said, I only played it twice, but I enjoyed it a lot. I could read this off real quick. Machine is a game of clever bidding and building, and betraying your friends as they try to do the same. Spend your money wisely in auctions on parts to complete your robot and unleash unique abilities on your opponents. Um, Now, I think the biggest factor for me is this game really doesn't take long, and it's 2 to 4 players, but I think that's the biggest thing. I can play this game a couple times and not get tired of it because it's a pretty quick game. Catan, now I'm gonna be honest, like, I love this game. We play it all the time, but whenever we play it, it's just once that night, maybe twice. But after the first one, I get such a headache because it's just so much shouting, yelling, and it takes a long time.
Uh-huh.
Especially if you're playing with Yusuf. Yusuf, if you're hearing this, you take forever. Um, but this game, it's quick, and I feel satisfied if I win. I only won once. The other time it was with my other friend, but um, I think it's a unique idea, and the reason I also think unique, I don't even know what their direction with this is later. Um, but I think what they could do with this essentially is, like, how the Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, they all have, like, they could come up with robots that have characteristics or something that people like get tied to, like, oh, this is the best robot, or this is and then as far as we said, additions or expansions, I should say, rather, they can add on more cooler robots in the future, so people want to buy those, or limit the really cool ones, the best ones. Um, but yeah, I think they're headed in the right direction. They're doing it a different way than most board games are done.
Yeah.
Um,
So kind of coming back to that, like one thing that for the people that are listening, so the people that are listening generally are people either that are interested in building their personal brand or have a small business that they're looking to take some lessons and apply to their own brand. So just a couple of things I wanted to just quickly touch on is that number one, what we see from the way that they're rolling out this board game is that you have to understand how the actual product that or that the space you're in actually markets their product, right? And what actually works
exactly.
in terms of advertising and getting the word out. So what's smart about these guys is they know that word of mouth is the best way to spread this. So how do you actually get word of mouth is you get people that are, we could say Mahir is like a micro influencer, right? Like he may not be the biggest on social media, but we know that, at least 10 people have bought Catan because of Mahir, right? And so this person has
Absolutely.
some pull, right? And his word matters when it comes to board games in his circles, right? And so I think that's a really, especially at the local level, like you may not be doing something that's crazy, trying to get national level attention, is just find these people that have some authority in the space they're in, get their opinion, see what they, and work with them, try to get them bought into the vision that you're actually working towards so that they can give you feedback and then they'll also share with their friends, right? That's one of the most underrated things ever, right? Mahir, I don't think they're paying you at all, but now you're on this
No,
podcast talking about
I'm
this.
not. I'm
You know
I'm
what I mean?
actually taking advantage of this to kind of do it for them. They didn't really ask me to go on a podcast and talk about this game. I just thought this is a cool platform for me to be able to. Such a cool idea. I've been thinking about it since COVID, like how all this stuff just blew up. The
Mm-hmm.
TCG world, even NFTs. People look at that. I know you guys talked about it before, but people look at that as collectibles too, and
Hmm.
you see it as investments and how people just want to have it even
Can
though I'm
can
not
you
quite sure if they
can you touch a little bit on NFTs for the audience that may not be familiar with what those are?
non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a digital asset. I mean, I'm no expert, but it's a digital asset, and they say you own it. Now, I'm not quite sure if you own it, but that's kind of what it is. Uh, Now I know like there's the NBA, for example, they're involved in it. They have what's called NBA Top Shot. So it's really cool. I mean, I tried it out too. It's like you own the moments. Like LeBron hits a game-winning three or something in the playoff. They put that in. You can think of it as like a digital trading card, okay? And you can trade
Mm-hmm.
it with people. But I'm sure if LeBron made a game-winning three, that thing's like 300,000 to $1 million, right? Um, and that's the market. That's that NFT NBA Top Shot market. Um, and so people are looking at it as investment and an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and like Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I have a Luka Doncic graded 9 card that I'm gonna
Oh
hold
wow.
for after he retires. I really think what hit the sports market is when Kobe died. Miss that guy. Um, when he died, people wanted
Mm-hmm.
everything Kobe, and his rookie cards and all that stuff blew up. And I think that's kind of what got everyone wants the rookie cards of like the Patrick Mahomes or Otani, for example, in baseball. They all want these cards so they can hold on to it and flex it essentially until it's worth a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing the same thing with NFTs and NBA. Essentially, they've used their branding to say, hey, they have their fan base and everything, right? They have their cult already. They're able to get so many people involved in it, and they do things to limit it, like drops.
Mm-hmm.
Thursday, they drop it. They announce it on Twitter. NBA Top Shop will go on Twitter. They'll announce, oh, this is coming up. So be ready for this. And usually, you make a profit on it, regardless. You'll definitely make a profit. I've never lost money on it. But I even have some like, oh, I kind of want to keep this. Like, this is one of my favorite moments. I remember this.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I found out is through my friends, and they showed me, and I sat through it while they waited for the drop. So word of mouth, same thing as board games, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you know more about NFTs than I do, but that was one of my personal experiences with it.
Yep. 100%. I think the two things that I'm really getting out of this conversation so far, two themes that are that keep coming up in this discussion, I would say the first one is people buying things because they want to belong to a certain, or they want to visually show that they're a part of a certain community,
Yes.
right? So as Mahir has coined it, flexing, right? Most people aren't actually thinking about it, thinking like, hey, I'm going to flex on everyone, but subconsciously there is something going on like, hey, like, I'll give you an example. This is real. I started watching Drive to Survive in June. I finished that series in like 2 weeks. Now I have a Mercedes jacket. I have a Fernando Alonso hat.
Oh,
I have like
I looked at that stuff. I'm like, I don't know who to have an affinity with. Yeah, I love everyone. So I didn't buy anything yet. But no, I definitely looked at it and I wanted to do the same thing.
Why do we do that? Why do we have this feeling that, hey, I want to buy
Because you want to
this?
be a part of that community, right?
Right. You want to signal to people, hey, like, hey, I know about Formula One. Even though probably you're not thinking it like that, like, hey, I'm going to buy this so people think I know about Formula One and I'm into it. You're probably not thinking that. But subconsciously, that's what it is, right? Like, you want to show people that you're part of this tribe. Hey, you can come talk to me about Formula One because I'm a follower. I'm a fan of Mercedes. I like Lewis Hamilton. You can come talk to me about this. You're telling the world, signaling to them like, hey, you can come talk to me about this topic, right? And that's what drives those purchases. And those are expensive things. Like a Fernando Alonso hat was like $60, man.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait a little bit till I have a strong affinity with a driver and I'll commit to that. You know, even remember you guys talked about the Bronco, they revived it, and you guys talked about the branding and all that. That's a cult of its own.
Yeah.
And the Mustang, they're a cult of its own. And you go into GM, you know, all these car companies, they got these small communities where, like, even Civics, they have their own community and fans. You know, so essentially you pick and choose what community you want to be a part of. And you want that to express who you are, you know, by flexing it and whatnot, even if it's subtle. Because at the end of the day, that's how you want people to perceive you. You know, you invite someone over, they come over, they see, oh, you have this. Oh, that's how this guy likes comics. This guy, likes Pokemon. You know, exactly.
So I was watching a video where they did a study on Apple users and non-Apple users, and what's crazy about that is like. The people that were not like non-Apple users, when they're shown like Apple things, like some part of their brain lit. I don't know. I'm not doing the study justice by any means. But what was interesting for me was that like those people were buying those products because they were anti-Apple, not so much that I like Samsung, right? And so that study showed
I
like,
have
essentially,
friends like that. Yeah,
like they were like, it's not so much about I like Samsung or I like this or that. The other thing is just I don't want Apple. That's how strong of an they're literally the statement they're trying to make is like, hey, I'm not Apple, right? Versus people that are Apple, they're like, hey, I'm Apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so that's the first kind of theme we can kind of for board games and in general in branding here is that we make decisions to signify to others, to the world, what our personality is, what our individuality is, right?
Yep.
That is the things we buy really. I mean, it's deeper than that, but one of the things that separates us is like, okay, I have an affinity toward this, that, the other thing, and I can show that with the things I buy, right? And so we use our money to make these purchases and signal to the world what it is we're doing. Now, the second thing that keeps coming up that I think is really important to discuss is that the people are spreading these games through word of mouth. And the reason the word of mouth is there is because the experience is there and it's a positive experience for people. Now, I think what's really interesting about board games in particular is that they've created, like, they've masterminded an experience. You know, they reverse engineered an experience so that people will learn more about their friends through playing a game, which I think is just absolutely
that's
incredibly
actually a good
smart.
perspective on it that I didn't think about. That's a good way to put it, and I think for a business standpoint, that's really smart. Instead of throwing so much money into advertisements, why don't you guys build a community that will build a foundation for your product, right? It's going to build a foundation so you don't have to keep flooding money into advertisements to stay relevant, right? I think it's about creating that foundation that will always stay there, and you can expand on that whichever way your business decides to.
Yeah, 100%. Like, think about it. Like, I bought this product and it served me some useful life versus like I bought this game and I learned more about my buddy Mahir, through this. And our friendship grew because I found out, oh, he actually does this when he's like lying. And I know, you know what I mean? Like you find out little nuances about people that you don't know. And that's like when you're creating an experience for people, I think really thinking about how to create such an experience where like the true, like the most valuable thing you can give someone is an understanding of themselves and relationships, right? Like what is, and that's my opinion, right? Maybe some people have different opinions, but like relationships.
I agree with that too. Yeah.
You know, an understanding of yourself. And if you can create a game that facilitates your own growth in yourself and also your friends, you not only like, we were talking about nostalgia again, right? Like when we remember Machinate, when we remember Monopoly, we remember these things. And I was like, oh man, when I played this, I learned so much about how to actually deal with this like thing, right? And it may not be like directly related to what you're going through, but you have these positive experiences where you learn something about either yourself or a relationship grew, or maybe a relationship soured, right? And so that is,
could happen,
that is a much more powerful way of keeping your brand relevant than advertising is, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Is like you can keep pouring money into advertising and trying to convince people, hey, check this out, or hey, we're going to create an experience that's so memorable that people will then share the word and then keep the engine going for us, right? And so,
and I definitely think that latter is a very long-term investment in its own way. Advertisement's the quick way of just, you know, throwing money out there and just getting the world to know it. But when you create a foundation and all that we talked about, I think that foundation is that long-term investment that will help keep that afloat, that business model afloat.
Right. Well, we see that's like, I love how you said that. I think that's a really solid way to end. If you want to end it, is because what is the difference between like a product that stays the course and is able to survive for years and years and years versus what's not? And I would argue that it's brand. And how do you build that brand? Is you create these communities and how these board games are doing and how they're trying to go about. It's not easy. It's intangible, right? Brand is not something you can say you spend X dollars here and you'll grow X in your brand, that kind of thing. But it's something where you really just gotta try to reverse engineer and try to create an experience for people that's very memorable to the point where they'll share it. And that's what brand is, right? It's that intangible positive feelings you have towards a certain product or experience or whatever it may be, right? And so if you want to stay the course, you want to be relevant, not just now, but when the next COVID happens, right? You have to have those touches that you've had with people, right? And you got to invest in those touches. Well, Mahir, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. I mean, I just wanted to really just talk about this stuff because I thought it's so impressive. I've done my research on these companies too and all that. I talked to you a little bit about it. It's just pretty crazy how this stuff, like COVID obviously was a big factor of it, but it's just crazy, you know?
Yeah. This is when we started this podcast, there's the main brands that you think of, right? Like we wanted to stay away from, right? Like when we started, we were like, we're not going to do an episode on Apple. We're not going to do an episode on Nike unless we find something that no one else has covered, right? There's just so much about there that like, oh, everyone is talking about, like, think about branding, you think about Apple and Nike, right? Like those are it's like, I never thought
there's so much more to it.
Exactly. I never thought we'd be talking about a board game, right? But like here we are, there's so much to talk about. I mean,
it's everywhere in the world. That's what it is. I'm not even in marketing. I'm not even in any of this field, but I see it being so relevant. You know, I feel like I could go into that field and make something happen. But it's just so interesting. Like literally, you know, I'm not gonna get into it. Like everything I'm a consumer of, like Delta Airlines, Speedway gas station. I love being in I have affinity with these because of the reward systems and whatnot. But it's just like being part of that group, you know. I like flying Delta. I like going to Speedways, you know. I like saying that to people.
So one of the things we always do at the end of the episode is we ask the host, or the guest, sorry, I'm the host. We ask the guest that, what is your favorite brand? And you can't say the brand that we're talking about. So you can't talk about Machinate, but what is your favorite brand, would you say?
Brand overall or brand in regards of
overall?
Oh, shoot. I mean, can I say three that I've been impressed with? And I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
going to get too much into it.
yeah.
Um, because the airline industry is very, I don't think it's profitable, but the way Delta has done things, it's created a standard for me to where, for at least airlines in America, I haven't flown any other. I've only been to McNamara since 2012.
Hmm.
I've only been flying like Delta partners and domestically at least.
Can you give an
Um,
example of what did it for you?
it's they created a standard like McNamara terminal is so much different than um like the North terminal, and I'm a Delta card holder. Um, I got my friends to be card holders. The miles, I love anything with a point system. I sign up for every point system. That's why I only go to Speedway or Shell gas stations.
Hmm.
And you know I'd use those gift cards that I'd redeem for like my card business that I did last year. That's how I kept it going. But like Delta, for example, like I learned what Lotus, the Biscoff biscuits, they use that specific one or the Kind bars. They have Starbucks coffee, so they're using all these
Hmm.
other smaller brands to help like show like, hey, we got these nice products for you.
Hmm.
Um, and their in-flight system, they have Hulu and HBOs. These
Oh wow.
exclusive, yeah. So
So they're really
um,
investing in that customer experience.
not just the airplane, and we can go into this more, but it's not just the airplane; it's the whole experience from when you get to the
And you get
airport.
even the terminal itself.
McNamara
Right? Yeah.
terminal. Yeah, you go to some of these Delta hubs. Like I just came back from LA, LAX. It's nothing crazy, but you can definitely tell where there's Delta gates. Salt Lake City's new airport with the Delta hub and everything, insane,
Hmm.
insane. McNamara again, it's a standard for me. Like I rate other airports like based off McNamara. Is it better or worse?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I guess Delta, Speedway too. I mean, they became the second biggest convenience store, and you see how they are. They have the same theme as a corporate gas station and convenience store everywhere. They became the biggest behind 7-Eleven, I believe. And then I think recently 7-Eleven ended up buying them out
Oh really?
as because it's their next biggest competitor, right? Um, oh, I mean, Speedway's still going to be Speedway. 7-Eleven's still going to keep them separate, but I think they have ownership. Don't fact check me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But I think those two, off the top of my mind, there's definitely a lot more. But you brought that question to me, out of the blue. So that's
Put you on the spot.
what.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, all right, Mahir, thanks again so much. It's been a pleasure. Now, Mahir, no offense, but I did not expect that level of depth and understanding of branding and marketing from someone who is an actuary. That was a really fun discussion. As always, I have my key takeaways from this episode, but before we get into that, I want to share with you a clip from a discussion we did with Mahir's younger brother, Gerard, on the branding of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Likewise, LeBron, he went into LA to win rings, obviously. One thing, we already talked about the success. Two, he wanted to build his brand, whether it was with Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, whether it was with Blaze Pizza, or more so, whether it was with his HBO content, The Shop, whether it was Space Jam. You're not going to get those opportunities in a different city. Maybe New York, but not to the extent of LA. So LA gives you that opportunity to market yourself, or people will reach out to you to market. There's rappers who are always doing music videos. There are movies that are always being shot that need extras or guest appearances. That whole entertainment industry being there, that itself is going to make even the most average player relevant.
If you enjoyed this episode with Mahir, I am positive you will also enjoy the episode with Gerard. Check it out wherever you're listening to this podcast. It is episode number 7. Now here are my key takeaways. Number 1, think about how you can create an organic, memorable experience for your customers. Board game creators have reverse engineered how to give their customers a unique, memorable, fun experience every time that their users play the game. This is the secret sauce for word of mouth. And number 2, people buy into brands that they feel reflect their personality. when you do your job right and you create a brand that connects with your target audience, they will buy in and they will, as Mahir would say, flex it to their friends. And that is all for this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, please consider leaving a review and sharing with a friend who may be interested. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.